Yeah, I mean, Finland is one of those countries that really is centre stage for a number of reasons. Some of them positive and some of them very negative during the Second World War. But you know, the moving away of
Oh, hold the
Finnish
phone.
forces
Breaking
away.
news. Breaking
Uh,
news. The Americans are back. The Americans are attempting to do D-Day round two on the port of Cherbourg here. They are attempting to land on Cherbourg. Cherbourg is only defended by one division here at the moment. I'd imagine that Mordred is looks like it's frantically rushing some armour up to try and deal with this. Um, but yeah, as has been pointed out in chat, by the way, Finland is the only country to lose in World War Two twice, which is a sad but true fact. Um,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
we are seeing that the Allies have decided that actually maybe they shouldn't have given up that Normandy beachhead, and they are trying to take it back. I mean, let's do some numbers here. It looks to me like we've got at least one division of German armour. That looks like some light armour we've got coming ashore, so 5 units of that. There's 61 troop convoys in total here. There is a lot of people trying to land there. Um, this could be problematic for Mordred. He's already had to pull a lot of troops down south to deal with this sudden influx down here. Again, actually, I think this comes back to something you said earlier, Dan, about this is swatting. He's got to swat a lot of flies, hasn't he?
Yeah, a huge amount, and that problem is only going to be exacerbated as time goes on. One of the big pluses, as far as the Germans are concerned, when they managed to really take over big chunks of Europe in the start of in the early years of the Second World War, is they get a huge amount of real estate. We can see from Toulouse on the French coast, they're way up into the reaches of Russia. But that also comes with a massive responsibility, and it's one hell of a lot of ground real estate to look after. And now, with a determined, numerically superior American force, alongside a highly trained and highly motivated British force, with three French forces thrown in the mix, and some shaky allies on the German side, it's looking decidedly dicey.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say that the Americans are always fashionably late to wars, and they seem to be doing that here as well in D-Day terms, unusually. But yeah, it's interesting to see that the AI has clearly picked up that it does need to do a naval invasion, and I do wonder whether that's something that Mordred is now going to have to deal with. I mean, I would expect to see he's got problems down here now anyway, because now he knows the Allies have tried to land here once. They'll absolutely try and do it again. And I think what we're going to see here, we can sort of see already forming up, is he's realised he's now got to keep more units down here than he did before. And again, going back to our original point, the Soviets aren't going anywhere. Well, I mean, actually, the problem is they're going a hell of a lot of places. They're going places that he would not like them to go.
Yeah, and you know the once the Soviet momentum really kicks in, and the problem there's a lot of the problem that the Germans face is starting to lose big formations of men. The Germans, generally speaking, on the Eastern Front, where they can hold a stretch of line, a number that's roughly comparable to the opposing Soviets, that's not such a big deal. Once a big bite is taken out, for example, an encirclement that sees a couple of 100,000 troops disappear off the German army's order of battle, that changes things in a big way and has knock-on effects further up the line.
So I think it's again where it's a bit more historical down here. I think one of the things that is worth again coming back to is Romania. Um, it looks at the moment at least like he's to a certain extent managing just about to kind of hold the Soviets off here, but it's hard. And that Romania is such a linchpin due to its oil industry.
Yeah, I mean, as you
Oh,
rightly
speak of the
pointed out,
devil, as we're watching, Romania has switched sides. Romania has been beaten and has switched sides.
I mean, it's quite good that we've seen that because all of a sudden we can actually comment on just how important that is. Ploesti oil fields that we can see front and center of our screen at the moment are really one of the real engines, if you like, of German industry. Without them, a lot of things are not going to happen. Now, with those changing sides, there's all of a sudden a really big situation because not only are German troops now no longer have an ally with them, but also they find themselves, if you like, stuck out in no man's land, having to reconsolidate a line, missing more troops, and with less of their own guys to do it with.
Now, we've clicked on the Soviets here just so you can get an idea of the Soviet forces in the area, because obviously we've been looking at this from the perspective of Germany, and you're only really seeing what Germany can see there. We're now seeing what the Soviets can see. This is the forces the Soviets have now that Mordred's got to deal with down here in Romania. Um, as Dan says, there's real danger here because of the way this is placing out. We can already start to see units are getting overrun. Um, he really needs to hold on to this territory. There's a real danger that there's an enormous potential kind of pocket of German troops that are going to disappear here. The green in this instance are the Romanians, because they're on our side. The reds now are. Actually, let's have a look. The game's being a bit weird with its colours. Let's go back to the Soviets here. So again, just back to our level of Soviet forces. Here is the Soviet view of the world. We've talked about just how many divisions the Soviets had, the sheer amount of manpower they have, but you can see it here really written large. These are all forces the Soviets have. They're also going to be streaming back from here, remembering that Finland is out of this war now. That is a lot of everything going on. And yeah, Mordred losing Romania is, to a certain extent, I'd argue that may even be a bigger problem than the issues in Normandy.
Certainly a big deal. I mean, if Mordred is able to keep Normandy as a fairly sizable and manageable invasion without the break out, and it should be worth, if we do get a chance to go back to Normandy right now, it's actually gives us a good opportunity to make that comparison. Is the Normandy campaign historically is fascinating, and it gives us a real important look into actually the much wider knock-on effect it had. That there are two forces who effectively have polar opposite jobs. One in the historical Normandy invasion, of course, being the Brits, who managed to soak up a lot of this counterattack effort, as we've seen Mordred making, trying to stamp out that foothold.
And in
Second
historical terms, they're the ones who are on this kind of, I'm moving my mouse on the screen so people can see. They're the ones who are almost forming the anvil here, aren't they? While
that's right, yeah, they're the shield on the eastern border, if you like, and by soaking up a lot of that pressure, what it allows to happen is that the numerically superior Americans to land, build up their own troop concentrations for a thrust southward. Is eventually going to cut off the Cherbourg, the Cotentin Peninsula, break out into France. Once that breakout starts, that's when problems just are going to multiply at a very, very quick rate. All of a sudden, a half dozen divisions isn't going to contain them anymore.
Now, what we can see here that Mordred won't be able to see is the Allies aren't giving up on their landings. They are still landing. Now, they seem to have decided they're going to aim slightly lower. It does look like we're about to see an invasion of the Channel Islands here, which, it's a place to liberate. I mean, I like Bergerac as much as the next man, but historically that's something that happens much later in the war, isn't it?
In fact, I have to admit here, I don't know entirely, but I have a feeling it doesn't happen at all. The Channel Islands are left and not occupied until post-war, but I could be corrected on that.
I think you're right. If not, it's very late. I do suspect that what we're seeing here again is it's that swatting of flies. Something that's worth coming back to, of course, remembering is we're talking about this, and this is a game. But something that Dan touched on earlier is just, again, back to the D-Day landings and remembering why we're doing this. What we're looking at here is what could have been the worst case scenario. Now, to a certain extent, for the Americans and the British, and it is worth pausing and just thinking that the sheer amount of kind of people that died as a result of these attacks and gave their lives and were wounded to do this. If those Normandy landings hadn't have succeeded, an awful lot more people would have had to do the same again.
Absolutely, I think you're entirely right in bringing up that, and it's a personally an important one for me as well, as I have a great uncle who's named on the Bay Memorial to the Missing, actually in Normandy itself. He fell in the attacks there in July. He was only a 19-year-old lad, and the impact wasn't just felt on the battlefield there. If you scroll back out to the UK, somewhere up in the northeastern part of the United Kingdom, there was a family and many others amongst them that were absolutely devastated by that impact.
It's an interesting point to make. I mean, we talk about losses, and we'll have a look over Norway here, and we are seeing an American invasion of Norway. The Americans have pushed into Norway, so that secondary plan has kicked in. But something picking up on something you said there, Dan. I mean, I read an interesting paper a little while back that was talking about calculating not just the loss of World War II, but the people we never got to meet, so to speak, the families that were never made, the everything beyond that. And by some numbers, by some of the calculations that these particular kind of sociologists had done, for the Soviet Union, that essentially amounted to 49 million people that either died in the war or were never born because those people were not around to have those babies and build those families. So I think it is always worth remembering that enormous impact that it has.
Yeah, I mean the numbers are absolutely staggering when you think of them that way, and for all the for all the awful and terrible things that Joseph Stalin had said and done in his life, he did say one thing which actually strikes a chord to a certain extent. In that he said that one death is a tragedy, and I think it was a million. He said it was a statistic. And there is a risk of looking at things that way. Actually, what we're looking at is a million tragedies in that context, and in this case, 20 million tragedies on the Eastern Front, on the Soviet side alone. So the Second World War is a poker game that's played with chips, but those chips are men's lives.
Absolutely. I mean, so let's take stock here and let's do a bit of a pan out and look at the situation that the Allies versus the Germans are facing right now. So something to note is you mentioned earlier about the landing in the south of France. Again, the Allies have not given up on landing down here in France at the moment. We can see now that they're essentially replicating history here, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, and this is a good, solid, logical move if you think about it. By opening up another potential avenue to exploit, those divisions that are now defending around Marseille and Toulon have had to come from somewhere. So wherever Mordred's had to reshuffle from, somewhere else amongst that already hard pressed line is weak.
And if we go back up here, we can see that there's another landing underway in Norway. And it looks like it's not just the Americans that are pushing into Norway as well. We can see actually, if we go up north, the Finland leaving this war, and Finland effectively swapping sides, I think. Yes, and if we look at Finland, yeah, I mean, we can see here the Finnish order of battle. Finland are pushing into Norway as well, and there's a real danger here that you know, it's more defensible territory down here, but every one of these things that's lost is a huge impact on Mordred's resources, on what he can do, and everything else. We've also got, looking at it over here, there's a British landing happening over here on in the kind of, I'm terrible here. This is what is now Croatia, would it be?
And it looks like the Dalmatian coast to me there. It's a little tricky
Oh
to
yeah,
see,
no,
but
you're right.
south of
Let's
Trieste
have a
there.
look. Yeah, we're in Bosnia. So the
Okay.
Allies are landing in Bosnia and Dalmatia. Now again, this is potentially problematic. For the Allies as much as for Mordred, because again, one of the reasons the fighting here was so hard in earlier stages of the war and in Greece was again the terrain, and we can really see the terrain here, these mountain ranges, these everything else. Now, if you can take them, brilliant, but if you can't take them, they're a big barrier to get past.
Yeah, terrain's a massive issue, and to an extent, it's a certain element of force equalizer. In that Italy being a perfect example, just over that part of the Med there, in that might have a massive numerical superiority, but if you're penned into a relatively small area, actually you could be held by a significantly smaller, still professional and efficient force. And so, to a certain extent, without any real avenues to exploit, the Germans are able to allocate less numbers of troops to hold down numerically superior forces.
And we're seeing here again another massive redeployment that Mordred's having to do to try and deal with this. And again, this is a serious problem that the Germans had in real life. Um, you know, it's just that constant pressure from all sides, and we come back to it again and again. It really has to be emphasized to kind of the role that the Soviet Union played in winning the war. It's we we rightly focus in Britain and to a certain extent in America as well on the war in the West, but the war is won in the East. It's won everywhere. Everyone chips in. It's a combined effort. It's an Allied victory, but it really shouldn't be underestimated, the importance of what happens in the East. I mean, if we look down at where the furthest reaches are now, we're starting to edge here towards Hungary. The Romania, Mordred's pushing back into Romania from the south, which makes sense when you think he's desperate to secure those oil fields again.
Yeah, absolutely. Those oil fields are really they're if you like the beating heart of the German industry. You can imagine the knock-on effect. It's also worth pointing out that Germans put in a significant amount of effort during this period of time to try and deliver, if they can, a synthetic oil product which is going to allow things like tanks to run and aircraft to fly and all of the things that you would expect. In the same either.
Yeah, I mean we're looking here again.
Yeah, we've just been commenting on Romania as we go now, so it's looking like a big change for you, right?
Let me pull Mordred into the chat here so that everyone else can hear him as well. Let me unmute him. Mordred, you're unmuted. How's it going? That was a bit of a
Hello.
hairy situation down there in Italy for a while.
Italy wasn't too bad. Romania is where things were like really bad, and actually, the attack in Italy was perfectly timed because it was just as Normandy cleared up.
Yeah, so we saw the Normandy clear up, and then we saw the Italians. But and we've been talking about how actually this is almost reflective of like D-Day was an enormous thing, but even without it, there would have been further invasions. And yeah, we're looking now at your push back up into Romania from the south. We actually had the camera on Romania when they switched sides, which was good timing.
Oh,
I would have absolutely liked to have been on your stream and seen your face when they did.
it was stunned because I knew that Romania switches sides, but I thought it was just when they're conquered. But no, apparently it's scripted.
It's a scripted event, so it caught you out. So
Completely.
without divulging your battle plans too much, how are you finding? We've been talking about the need to kind of constantly remaneuver and deal with that. I mean, are you finding that's an enormous pressure on you?
Uh, it's definitely making me pause a lot, which because this is multiplayer means I actually click the pause button rather than just spacebar like you normally would. Um, but I just wanted to come in because Romania, there was actually a big pocket in there which had trapped a bunch of my tanks, but I just broke
Yes.
that
Oh,
free.
you broke the tanks out. So we
Yep.
noticed the pocket down there forming, and we were thinking, oh, well, that those troops are lost. So I think that's good to know for everyone on stream that that's a proper bit of Mansteining there, where
Yeah.
you've managed to pull your tanks out. So do you see before we get back to it? Do you how is the armor situation looking? Are you still managing to maintain a reasonably armored spearhead across?
Generally, I mean, I have my armor split into two large armies, which is Rommel's and then Dietrich's. Although I just noticed that Dietrich's actually lost the majority of his. He lost 16 units somewhere. So I guess I didn't quite save that pocket soon enough.
But
Damn.
anything's better than nothing at the moment. Well,
Yeah, that's true.
we'll let you get back to doing it, we're watching with interest. Norway is looking more fragile than perhaps you wanted, but I mean ultimately it's Norway,
Oh, I abandoned Norway. I made that decision basically at the start of the game. I thought, I can't hold it. I'm already under naval invasion. Holding two large coastlines? No, not happening. So I withdrew most of those, and I think that the Romania was under a lot of pressure. Then the Norwegian troops arrived, and that kind of stabilized Romania. Then they flipped sides.
Well, I mean you're holding in there. It's interesting to
holding.
watch. Second D-Day looks like it's failed as well. So we anticipate third D-Day. We look forward to seeing where third D-Day happens, and good luck.
Well, they've got the attack going into Dalmatia at the moment, so we'll see if I can contain that. Although I noticed that Rommel is passing by right now, so this is going to be a market garden situation. It's like, I happen to have tanks in the area, might as well use them.
Well, exactly.
All right, well, thanks, guys.
No, and we'll talk to you a bit soon.
All the best.
So you're getting a bit of a glimpse there from the other side. Don't forget we are multi-streaming this. Annoyingly, my chat command isn't working for that. So if someone in chat has got the link to the multi-tune and wants to post that, that'd be really useful. Because obviously, Mordred, if you're more interested in the strategic gaming side of this, it's well worth popping in onto the multi-stream or listening to Mordred doing it as well. It's really interesting to see all of this shape out and see how it goes. I think it's going to be very, very close run, but I do suspect those of you who said this might take longer than regular is than it would to do normally may not be onto a bad thing at the moment. It's a valiant defence going on here.
Yeah, it's really quite incredible how he's managed to.
Sorry, have I got link blocking in chat? No problem. Let me copy the link while Dan's updating you all on the situation.
Yeah, I mean it's. I think Mordred's pointed out very well. It really is a case of firefighting, and we knew that would be the case from the start. And my eyes are not really taken off Western Europe because I have a sneaking suspicion there's going to be a pretty strong retaliation made there. Of course, there are very short logistic and supply lines to support any army in the field there, and provided the Allies can make a landing and get themselves in charge of one of those major ports, we're likely to see that there's going to be a resurgence in that part of Europe.
It's interesting he talked about losing his armour in the pocket as well. I mean, to get any of armour out is an achievement, but at the same time, every loss hurts now for Germany. We're in August here, actually. We're in August 1944. We should probably talk a bit about some of the stuff that happened in August 1944. Dan, do you want to just give people a kind of a quick overview while I do the off-camera thing of running and grabbing a fresh beer?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, August 1944 is a fascinating period for a number of reasons. And it's not only on the front lines themselves, but you've got a couple of really famous actions, and a couple of famous incidents, and certainly a few which are infamous as well. One of them being the 4th of August of 1944, with Anna Frank being arrested alongside her family in Amsterdam, and tragically, all with the exception of the father would not survive to live to see the end of the war, VE Day, as we, of course, remember 75 years ago today. In the Normandy region, of course, there are some pretty major changes. You've got some significant breakouts, and you start to see American forces being built up. You've got American Air Force delivering increasingly heavy attacks against an increasingly further hard-pushed American forces. Have a couple of famous characters also lose their lives there. One of them was taken on a lot of fame in recent years, who dies on the 8th of August 1944, is a German tanker by the name of Michael Wittmann, who was generally referred to as the ace of aces. Now, I know Wittmann's going to be a name that many people will be associated to. I was very fortunate when I first started in history years back, meeting a chap by the name of Joe Eakins, who was a tank gunner on a Firefly, a Sherman Firefly tank back in 1944, and he was in fact the man who was credited with knocking out Michael Wittmann in his Tiger tank in August 1944. And Joe took me around around the land warfare hall at Duxford, and he talked me through the whole incident. He spoke of that day, and he said, "You know what? I never heard the name Wittmann until about 1975. All I know is I fired 4 shots that day, and I knocked out 3 Tiger tanks. In fact, it was the only 3 shots of the only 4 shots he fired of the entire war, for quite an interesting reason that I suppose goes to show that everybody's human." Quite simply said that his tank commander was actually knocked out at the start of that exchange. It had a round ricochet off his tank, and it had slammed the tank turret shut, which had knocked him unconscious as a commander. Joe had carried on, done his job, and had knocked out those tanks. And when his tank commander came round with a banging headache, who was seen as something of a hero, and quite rightly so. As a result, Joe was moved to the radio operator's position and never fired another round for the rest of the war.
Nice. So we're looking here at Romania now, or what was formerly Romania, and seeing a distinct lack of Romania. The Tsardom of Bulgaria is on the map.
Quite a big change, and of course a change which is not going to be a positive one as far as Mordred is concerned.
Well, I don't know. Let's see who they're actually working with. I think he might be all right here. Yeah, they are an Axis faction. I think he has successfully managed to pull it back from the brink down here, and essentially get control of the Romanian oil fields again via turning them into essentially a Bulgarian nation, which is again, it's not a bad thing. But at the same time, we've got issues still down here with his landings. Something that's interesting to me is actually that we've seen very little movement down here in Italy, which again is actually one of the areas of this game so far that's playing out relatively historic, isn't it?
Yeah, and exactly for that reason as well. And it's just an incredibly difficult piece of terrain to advance across. Only are we looking at these high mountains and these difficult to pass rivers, but as time goes on, we're looking now towards the end of August. It's not going to be a month or two before the weather really deteriorates, and any kind of movement is going to become almost impossible.
And I think we're seeing here that the attack down here has been repelled. I mean, to a certain extent, it looks like we do have another attempt at a landing going on here. It looks like the Americans are attempting to land again. But we can see just by looking at this coastline that, again, it touched on something that was a very historical problem for Germany, and certainly for Rommel at the time, when Rommel was kind of building the Atlantic Wall and everything else, is there's so much coastline that Germany essentially has to defend.
Yeah. Massive amount of coastline, and if you can imagine as well the huge expenditure that's put into actually trying to create this famous Atlantic Wall, which in name sounds incredibly impressive. It sounds like a real formidable barrier. In reality, it's more a series of posts which are blocking the key areas, such as the major ports, also the stretches of land that look like they could be open to an Allied invasion. It also means tying down a significant number of troops who have to sit on a bit of coastline, which may not even be attacked for a whole 5-year period of war.
And I think what we'll probably find at the moment, and we pause slightly a moment, I suspect that's largely because Mordred is desperately trying to sort out what he does down here. Because even though he has successfully managed to take some of this back, it's worth pointing out that there's still a little bit of socialist Romania still existing down here. And this isn't by any means over as a front. There's a real risk here again that he gets pocketed in the same territory he's just managed to take back. If we take, for example, let's have a look at it from the Soviet perspective, we can see they're still pushing here. But actually, we can see something else that we can see going on, is that oil supplies and fuel supplies are starting to get low, and that's a problem that everyone's having around about this time, I'd have thought.
Yeah, I mean, fuel is a real big deal. In fact, it's more of a big deal for the Allies who rely on it almost exclusively. We don't come over to Normandy in 1944, and we don't come in Operation Dragoon in 1944 with ships full of horses. You know, we're talking vehicles, we're talking tanks, we're using a huge number of aircraft. So Allies are more reliant, if anything, on fuel. And actually, one of the real amazing pieces of history, which is quite often overlooked, that comes through, is something known as Pluto, which is the pipeline under the ocean, which comes in from, believe it or not, an ice cream factory on the Isle of Wight in 1944, and it's quite literally a single, very heavy gauge pipe which transports fuel under the English Channel, and it brings it out at a place called Port-en-Bessin in the Normandy region, and it feeds massive numbers, huge numbers of vehicles for months and months, and in fact years on end.
It's something that the Germans really don't think about either. I mean, genuinely, like, all of you, just Google it for images. As Dan says, like, they disguise it as an actual ice cream factory. It's fantastic. It really does it well. But the Germans, and you can see it in the documents after the war, is one of the things the Germans underestimate is just how mechanized and the Allied forces, certainly in France, can be, because they just simply assume that no one could be moving that amount of fuel in. And it just has not crossed their minds that this kind of effort of essentially running these giant this fuel pipe under the channel has been successful. And it's an enormous problem for the Germans again. That it forces their reliance on dwindling oil supplies is an enormous problem. By the way, guys, if you're taking screenshots of this at any point, if you spot the kind of where we see the bit of Bulgaria falling or new places blowing, do feel free to tag me or Dan in on Twitter, and we'll retweet them. I'm at Garius, which is Garius, and Dan, you're at Dan Hill History. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
So let's have a look and do a quick stock take of what's going on here. So we're looking at things from the British perspective right now. So we can see where people are trying to get to, and we can see that the British effort at the moment is focused on landing here on the Dalmatian coast and then trying to sweep round. They're really focusing on trying to encircle the German forces that exist in Italy. We can also see from these arrows that right now there is a British invasion force that is massing to try and once again push into Nice, into Livorno, and push through. So whether Mordred realises it or not, his forces again are under threat in Italy, and there's a real danger here that if he's focused too much on Romania, he's going to miss out, and there's a lot of troops that be caught out here, and that'd be enormously damaging to the German forces.